Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so land banking. I'm not happening here, Daniel? All right, so what we'll do is, I'm happening here. Of course, everything that we're going to discuss here should be taken under advice. We're going to give general examples throughout the evening. And what we might do is, just while we get this sorted out, am I pointing the wrong way? Jamie is going to talk in detail about his 10 top strategies. We're going to touch on them tonight. But just to help everyone get educated from the beginning, we're going to show a very short video on land banking. So please, could everyone give this attention? Then we'll take it up to the next level. So Daniel, if you could start that for us. Thank you. Okay, so how was that? Did that make sense? Just hands up. I just want to make sure people got a basic understanding. Who's got some questions about land banking probably from here? No one yet? All right, you have, very good. We like young people with questions. I know you're playing with your hair, sorry about that. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is extend on that basic information and introduce Josh. Josh has got extensive background in property. So Josh, could you give us a little bit of a background and take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks Warren, and thank you everyone for coming this evening. Very impressed with your performance with the board breaking. Give yourselves a round of applause if your hands aren't too sore. So I thought I'd just share a little bit of a background on myself, where I've come from, where my knowledge has come from, and why I work for 21st Century Group of companies. I guess like most people, your story begins with your parents. Australia being a migrant country, first and foremost, my parents come from a pretty similar background. My parents immigrated here from the UK. They were filling a large gap that was needed for nurses back 30, 40 years ago. So we settled in a small town called Sunbury, which just so happens to be a town that is mentioned in a newspaper article that some of you might have found on your chairs earlier. So my mum and dad were nurses, and they were working there for quite some time, and something drastic actually happened to them. The government overtook the hospital and they ended up closing it down, which resulted in them losing their jobs. So that's one lesson for them. They thought they had a safe, secure job that was paying well, and I guess they learnt the hard way that sometimes that just doesn't exist. So my parents were forced to work at the Melbourne International Airport, which is about a 10-minute drive from Sunbury. My dad was a baggage handler for the rest of his career, and my mum just helped out making the sandwiches for the people that were boarding the aeroplanes. Just through chance, my mum was at a supermarket and they bumped into some family friends who introduced them to a wealthy Indonesian family who were looking to do some property development on the outskirts of Sunbury, which was at the time still classed as a country town. It's about 40 kilometres northwest of Melbourne CBD. I won't go through the whole story, but over the course of 10 years, my parents were able to get involved in this house and land estate. And with the knowledge that they gained from the wealthy Indonesian family, they were then able to build slowly but surely a property portfolio of residential properties. And over the course of 10 years, they were able to build something that wasn't enough for them to drive Ferraris and, be able to retire on a yacht. But after that 10 years, they were able to sell half of their portfolio. And then with the profit that they made, they were able to retain the other half of the portfolio, which was then paid off and provided that elusive residual income, that passive income, which so many people are just trying to find because they realize that sooner rather than later, they will have to replace their income should they wish to stop working at some point in time. So my parents were able to do that. They're one of the few who have been able to, and at the dinner table, the topic of real estate was also one that was very common, and that's where I got my knowledge from. So it didn't really come from your traditional school or university. Throughout the last 9 years of my working career, I've had the privilege of working with large-scale developers across apartment sales and house and land, and I've also known people who have personally been involved in land banking and other projects. So I've been able to see the good, the not so good, and I'm very pleased to be able to stand here and just pass on some of the knowledge that's been passed on to me to you guys, and I really look forward to doing so.
Thank you, Josh. So Daniel, if we could have the screen up, thanks very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the property in general, and the way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask Josh some questions which will lead to more questions. We just want to build up your knowledge of property, because we're going to assume that who here's honestly got no property investments at this stage? Who here's got their own property under control and maybe one investment property? Great. And who here's got more than one investment property? Okay, it's almost an even split across the room. So even for people that have got property, you will learn something new and you'll get great information from Josh. I promise you that tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about Sydney first of all. Who actually knows? Now, someone shouted this out last night, so if that person's here, don't shout it out. Who actually know how much Sydney prices have gone up on average just this year? Does anyone? 13%. Any other guesses? 15? 14? All right. 13% is what most real estate agents are saying, and some are staying higher. Does everyone understand from what you've learnt from Jamie today and talking about compounding growth, how important 13% in effectively 4 to 4.5 months is? Does everyone sort of understand that? I mean, that's phenomenal growth sitting on an asset. So, Josh, maybe if you want to talk a little bit more about property in Sydney, and or do you want to jump into Melbourne? Or
Well, why don't we just have a quick look at what we're seeing here. This is just something I literally just copy and pasted off the internet. This is from Australian Property Monitors. They supply a lot of data just to the general public. You can find this information on realestate.com if you wish. This is just a market snapshot as of Saturday, 9th of May, so it's quite recent. What this outlines is just how many auctions there were on a given weekend, how many were sold, and the clearance rate is what we really want to see as an indicator of consumer confidence, just how many people are out there trying to buy properties. As you can see, 89% clearance rate. So out of all of the auctions that occurred at that point in time, you have, if you were a vendor, an 89% chance that your property was going to sell on the day. That's almost 9 out of 10. So there's a lot of confidence right now. If you're a homeowner and you're looking to sell your property, chances are you're going to have a lot of competition, which is great for those guys. The total dollar value of sales reported is over, almost $500 million in Sydney. But this is the most important thing. This is the median house price of the properties that have sold recently. So for those of you who don't know what a median house price is, if you were to record all of the house sales from 1 to say 500, median is just the middle number that they've picked. So it's not quite the same as an average, but it's the middle number. And as you can see in Sydney, the median house price recently is just a touch over $1 million. $1 million. That's a big, big number compared to just 3 or 4 years ago.
so what that means is it's not that exciting to be a millionaire anymore in Sydney. For people, young people in the room, we've got a couple of 9-year-olds. Do you understand that what will be the median price for them when they're your age, whether that's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? Okay, it's going to be right up there. Now, another area of growth is Melbourne. And Josh, we might have a look at that.
Yep, so you're familiar with the previous page. This is the exact same page, but just a market wrap for the Melbourne area. As you're all aware, Sydney was colonised first, which is one of the main reasons why property prices are just a little bit higher at the moment, probably not in the future. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. Hang on. As you can see, there's still just as much, in fact, more properties that were listed for auction. The clearance rate is 80%, which, okay, is not as high as Sydney, but it's still a very, very good number. Your bets are that if you're going to sell your property, you've got an 8 out of 10 chance of finding a buyer on the day, which is great. And the median house price in Melbourne, as of Saturday, 9th of May, for auctions anyway, is almost $800,000. So when you put that into context, when you think of an average couple, say 25, 30 years old, maybe someone's on 60K, someone's on about $55,000 a year, which is roughly the average wage. I sent an email to my contact at CBA, just he's a home loan guy, and I said, David, if you were to say a young couple, you didn't have parents that could help you buy a property, how much is the maximum that you would be willing to lend these guys, provided they didn't really have any credit card debt or anything like that? And the number was around the mid-700s range. So if you're living in Melbourne, maybe if you're lucky, your first property might be 10, 15, maybe 20 kilometres away from the CBD. If you're in Sydney, I don't know, Warren, you know the area more than me. What do you think?
A long way away.
Long way away.
People sort of aware of what's happening in Sydney at the moment. Okay, there's areas in Sydney now that were just complete farmland when I'm a young man, and they've got $700,000 entry point for a 3-bedroom home. I'm sure we've all got stories about Sydney.
Absolutely.
It's just one of those cities with growth. So, okay, so what we might do then is, if you could explain some more opinions, why are property prices going so much? And
yeah, look, there's a lot of speculation in the newspaper, your friends down at the pub, as to why properties are going up so fast. You might read something like, people from China are coming in and they're buying all the properties. Well, yeah, that is true, but that's only a small part of it. There really is a larger picture. So I just thought I'd highlight some of the top 6 reasons why we feel property prices are rising so quickly. The first one is record low interest rates. Does anyone want to shout out what the cash rate is right now? Has anybody been following that? 2%, exactly. Thank you very much, sir. And I saw you before. Very good. I was watching. Very good. Record high levels of foreign investment. So yes, we are watching in the mainstream media. There are people from China coming in and buying apartments, but the reality is they're not just coming from China, they're also from Canada, they're from America. There's consortiums in Scandinavian countries that are buying up our commercial real estate. Why are so many people coming to Australia to invest their money? Well, historically, we've had a fairly stable economy. We did survive the last global financial crisis. We didn't leave it totally unscathed, but we did recover very well compared to a lot of other countries. So yes, there are a lot of people coming in right now. Australians love and trust real estate. I mean, you can't open a newspaper these days without at least a quarter of it being dedicated to the property market. You've got the domain section on Saturday. Real estate's almost become like rugby or football. It's almost like a national sport. It's something that everybody can talk about, everybody can have an opinion on, and that just makes people, I guess, in their own minds a bit of an expert, and everyone's willing to have a go. Self-managed super fund and negative gearing incentives. Well, we all know that if you're, say, on a high tax bracket, say you're earning $150,000, $180,000, and your tax bracket's around 42%. If you were to purchase, say, a brand new property, well, there are tax incentives which can help get your tax bracket down, which is fantastic for some people. Some of you might be aware that through self-managed super, a lot of people are now starting to invest through using that. It's just another, I guess you could say, weapon in their investment arsenal to help secure their financial future, which I think is fantastic. Second last, Melbourne and Sydney. I was fair. I kind of saw this, this rivalry happening, so I thought I'd be fair and I'd say Melbourne and Sydney among the world's best cities to live in. I just would like to point out that Melbourne was voted the world's most livable city 4 years in a row by the Economist magazine. I'm just saying. That's all. I'm not trying to say anything, but 4 times. Just see that. Just saying. Google it. And just the last one, record population growth figures. Yes, we do have a smaller population compared to other countries, and people really do want to live here because as a country, we're fantastic. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So from my point of view, that top one is record low interest rates. Now, there's some people in this room that are probably old enough, not me, to remember when interest rates were 17%. Okay, just for you young people in the room, 17%. What are the average interest rates now? Does anyone know for a home loan?
We just jumped online before, just on the phone. NAB have fixed principal and interest loans roughly around 4.6% right now.
Huge
That's
difference.
not an advertisement, by the way. I'm just saying that we just Googled it.
All right, so as Jamie said, for young people in the room, if your parents say, wait a few more years until property becomes cheaper, is that likely? No. No. Okay, we want to move forward now. Okay, great. All right, population growth. Who here knows a couple of things about population growth? What do people think in the room of Melbourne's population? Were you watching the video before? Yeah? Who knows what Melbourne's population is? Shout out, guess. 4 million? Yeah? 4.25 million. Okay, ready for a bit of a shock here. Around 2053, Melbourne is going to be larger than Sydney. Okay, I know we're in Sydney. I'm from Sydney. I grew up in Sydney. But Melbourne is growing faster than Sydney. And this is Australian Bureau of Statistics. And another interesting statistic, if you're not aware, is that in 8 years, Perth is going to be bigger than Brisbane. Perth is going to be bigger than Brisbane. Okay, so this is, I'm just highlighting here, you want to have all this information so you know what's going on out there. Because we know Sydney is a very expensive place to enter the market, but have a look at some of these other areas and even the growth of Melbourne compared to Sydney. All right? What we're trying to do here tonight is keep giving you more and more information so you've got an arsenal to go out there when you're ready to invest. Make sense? All right, so we're going to have a look now at some of the key fundamentals. We'll get one coming up.
Beautiful.
Okay, do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. So just like Warren Buffett is a fundamental investor in the stock market, he looks at those tied and trusted rules as to how to invest for the long term. So do we as property professionals. So when we look for a particular area to invest, which is a question I always get asked at every single dinner party or when I'm out with my friends and people are meeting me for the first time, so Josh, I've got $500,000. Where should I buy, mate? Where should I buy? Look, I can tell them to go buy in a satellite city or a growing area, but the reality is if they bought a property there, yeah, they'll do well, but what if they don't know me in 4 or 5 years when they go to buy their next one? What I'd rather do is just outline some dot points, and I strongly suggest anyone looking to maybe look at property investment as a strategy in the future, jot these down, because it just might mean the difference between buying in a good area and buying in a dud area. So please have your pens ready. The first one is jobs in every sector of the economy. So what do we mean by that? Well, I know Jamie might have been given some examples today or maybe tomorrow about apartments on the Gold Coast. What is it about the Gold Coast that makes it not always the best place to invest in certain asset classes? Well, the fact is they rely very heavily on one sector of the economy, and that's tourism. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what would happen if tourism were to dry up? What would happen to jobs and therefore growth and therefore property prices? Well, they would go down. So we want jobs in every sector of the economy to cover our bases. We want tourism, we want mining, we want import-export, we want education, we want construction. So these are the kind of things that you have to look for. If you can find at least 5, then that's just one step that you can take to further getting down to the numbers as to what kind of investment area that you'd like to use. Government infrastructure is another big one. How close is it to, say, a bus line or a train station? How close is it to a freeway or a highway or an international airport? What is going to possibly be built in the area? Because if you can locate an area that you feel is going to be on the grow, well, that will actually compound your possible growth over the next 5 or 10 years, as opposed to an area that's already very established. Next point, please. Strategic importance. Well, this can mean just a high number of things, but I'll give you one example. Okay, so I live in a normal residential street about 6 k's from Melbourne, and there was an old property on a corner. So a corner property obviously has 2 street frontages. Now, a local builder ended up acquiring that property. He went and got plans and permits, and then about a year later, the house was knocked down, and then about 9 months after that, I saw 4 townhouses. Can you build 4 townhouses, particularly on a property that might not have 2 frontages? No. So that guy knew, from a strategic point of view, hey, if I buy a property on a corner with 2 street frontages, potentially subject to council approval, I can make a lot of money. So that's just something that you might want to jot down for future reference. Foreign investment, we've already spoken about this. Foreign investment comes in many ways, shapes and forms. So for example, where I live in Melbourne, there are a very high density number of private schools, and there are people from certain countries, like in Sydney, that are looking to invest in certain areas, in certain school zones, so that their kids can actually go to school in that area. And that creates extra competition. So if you've got a house for sale, you can be rest assured that when you do actually go to sell your property, if you're in an area with fantastic schools where the limited number of people living in an area is capped, well, that's extra competition, and that can mean the difference between another $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 later on down the track. Scarcity of quality land. Well, I'll give you an example. We have a project in Bendigo, and a lot of people have the common misconception that in that area, because it's in, further inland, that there's a lot of land out there, and therefore the property prices won't grow. But what they don't realise is that the topography is actually not ideal for property development. So a lot of developers actually can't develop on that land, even if they would, which means if the land is scarce, once again, increased competition, and that is what can possibly get you more capital gains later on. What else have we got, Woz? An ability to add value. So Jamie will touch a lot more on this tomorrow, but an ability to add value, what could that mean? It could be something as simple as doing a renovation. What if you tore out the bathroom and the kitchen, you did it correctly, and then you put the property back on the market? That is one way that you can make money. I'm sure you've all heard stories about someone who bought an old home, did it up, sold it 9 months later, and made a very healthy profit. Has anyone heard a story like that before? Got a friend or a neighbour? Yeah, about half of you. That's just a very small example, but we'll go into some more, I guess you could say, complicated examples later on tomorrow with Jamie. Next one. And a fast-growing population. So do you want to invest in an area where people are coming into the area, or do you want to invest in an area where people are leaving? Coming in, absolutely. So we need a fast-growing population. That one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I mean, just based on what we had before, does everyone understand that if Melbourne's going to be bigger than Sydney, even if it does take another 40 years, that's a fast-growing population, okay? Did anyone in the room actually know that Melbourne was going to be bigger than Sydney? Quite a few people,
yeah,
great.
Few people, fantastic.
So it really caps off that. Okay, next, if we just want to have a look at, I guess, levels of investors. We know some people here don't have any property. Some have already got 2 or more properties. One is what we would call an average. One is getting either towards advanced or is advanced. So Josh, can you highlight some of your ideas of what the key differences are?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, I've got almost 10 years of property experience, and I've had the privilege of watching a lot of people make a lot of money in property, and I've seen what I still call a privilege, watching people make ill-informed decisions and then not make so much money, and in fact sometimes lose money. And over the course of 9-10 years, I've been able to just detect patterns, and I really enjoy this part of the presentation because what I want to talk about is the average buyer, the average Joe or punter versus an advanced investor, and some of the advantages that they have over everybody else. So on the left-hand side, we've got what the average buyer does and what an advanced investor does on the right-hand side. So an average buyer will buy solutions, where an advanced investor will buy problems. So what problems and what solutions am I referring to? What I'm talking about is Australia's housing affordability crisis. Would you agree that we actually, particularly in Sydney, do have a housing affordability crisis with a median house price of $1 million? Yeah, it's full on. It's very, very interesting. So I'm referring to that problem. An average buyer might buy a solution. So they might buy a brand new property, or they might buy a brand new apartment. That's a solution because someone's already taken a problem, which is the housing affordability crisis, and they've already made a solution. They're going to make a lot of money. You might make money long term buying a solution, but do you want to make a little bit of money over the long term, or do you want to make a lot of money over the long term? You want to make a lot. So what's the next one? An emotional decision versus a commercial decision. Who's been to an auction before? Good, most of you. Who has seen two buyers on either side of the street just doing these ones? It's full on, isn't it? That's what we call an emotional decision. Now, we don't always know why these people are going so crazy at each other. It could be any number of things. Maybe, your old man lives down the street, you need to take care of him. Maybe you're in that school zone. Maybe your kids have to go to that area. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but that's an emotional decision. And real estate agents are very good at making people have to make an emotional decision. That's what they get paid to do. That's how they get that extra $50,000, $60,000 out of you. An advanced investor will make a commercial decision or an informed commercial decision based on numbers, facts, a cool head, and indifference. Third one, uses gut feel. Oh, I live in the area, I can see it, why don't I just buy this property? As opposed to someone who might use tools and data, someone who might see sold property prices on RP Data or even realestate.com.au. They might Google the address and see what it's sold for in the past. You might even want to subscribe to a particular company that releases data each quarter. That's the kind of difference between making a gut feel decision and, an informed commercial decision. We'll ask friends versus paying for a consultant. Everybody's got that mate down at the pub that tells them where to invest and tells them about the one that got away, as opposed to someone who will actually pay good money and use a consultant, someone who's actually got a proven track record and can give proper advice. So that's fairly straightforward. Average buyers like to own property. There's a bit of a tradition where you can be proud of the fact that you own this particular property, whereas advanced investors, well, they like to control the property, don't they? Can I just get a show of hands? Who's actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, or has at least heard of it? Yeah, most of you, fantastic. So one of the lessons that he teaches is controlling the asset without necessarily owning it, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. An average buyer will try and do everything themselves. My girlfriend, she used to rent a room in her house, and the landlord was also the real estate agent and was also the guy that would come out and fix the oven, was also the guy that would mow the lawn. No wonder he couldn't hold down a job himself. Whereas somebody else, exactly. Whereas someone else will actually, owns a property, tries to do everything. Whereas somebody actually has an A-team behind them, someone who can take care of the property management, do the maintenance, do the figures, so they can go on and do whatever it is they want to do later on down the track. Fourth last, cost focus. Yeah, I can buy the property, but then I've got to pay conveyancing fees, I've got to get a property manager, now I get a tax return. Yeah, it's going to cost me $4,000, $5,000, as opposed to someone who will be value focused. So they're looking at the result at the end. Okay, yeah, I buy this property now for $500,000, and yeah, it's going to cost me a little bit of money, but I can potentially make $1 million later on down the track. And that's the difference between someone who looks at the short-term loss as opposed to the long-term gain. Look, we're running a little bit short on time, so I'll just get to the most important one. I would probably say a retail buyer, someone who jumps on realestate.com, someone who just wants to see what's out there and have to compete with other people, as opposed to people who do have a team of professionals working behind the scenes, like our members, our 21st century members, and we can actually find properties for you and put you in good hands.
So great, thanks for that. Let's give Josh a hand. Now that's some great information already. We've still got just about 15 minutes to go on this presentation, but what I'd like to suggest is this. Some people are writing notes, some people have had dinner and they're sort of swaying this way and swaying that way. Our 2 9-year-olds are just going ferociously there. They're like it's 8 o'clock in the morning, they're just starting. So
it's the future Donald Trump and Frank Lowy.
So here's some good news. There's a lot of information here. But most people in this room have already spoken to someone on the phone about coming to the event. Hands up if you have. just so I get an idea? About 2/3 of the room. Everyone is going to be designated a property consultant. Even if you don't need one yet, they're there, and they will have all this information, okay? And right at the end, I'm going to introduce you to a couple more of our team members are here tonight. So please take in as much as you can, but rest assured if you're thinking, wow, I'd love to ask this, love to ask that, there'll be plenty of time tomorrow, even later tonight for some of you, or after the seminar. But let's do this. Everyone, don't worry about getting up, but just get in more of a power posture position. Elbows off chairs, okay? Really big breath, and out. Okay, and we'll move forward. Can I just have that up again? Sorry, threw you out there. So let's just quickly then go through the tenements of land banking for a few minutes, and I think we'll look at some examples, Josh.
Fantastic. So as I mentioned before, controlling a property versus owning a property. When you own property, yes, you do have outgoings, council rates, water rates, fees and charges, land tax for certain properties. But with land banking is simply the process of securing the property today, like Robert Kiyosaki says, without having to pay for it until a later date.
Terrific, nice and simple. That's what we like, simple, straightforward strategies. We might like to talk about, this is a specific example, Josh, and I think people have that, but you might just like to touch on that quickly again.
Yeah, just very quickly. I know we're a little bit short on time. So this is an article that you can just Google yourself if you just put that in the search. Family to become multimillionaires, as the farmland they bought for $300,000 in 1982 is now worth $70 million. Now, as you can see in the first dot point, this was a property in Sunbury where I was born and where I grew up and where my parents did their property investing, northwest of Melbourne. It was considered largely as the boonies. Why would you live there? It was the sticks. I was always made fun of by my city friends. Why would you live out so far? Well, there's 70 million reasons why this family lives out there. But the reason why we put this in the presentation is because it is an example of land banking in its purest form. A family of immigrants went out, they banded together, there was 10 of them. They managed to scrounge together $300,000 approximately, and over the course of a few decades, they were able to sell this property with an estimated value of $70 million. And that's just land banking right there.
Yeah, it's a great story. Who'd like to have a story like that? Everyone, okay. Now, why land banking? Okay, what are the reasons why people should look at it as an investment?
Absolutely. Well, according to the article before, there were 70 million reasons why land banking is a good idea. But let's just touch on the top 4. Well, the first one, land is what appreciates, and Jamie will go into more detail later on tomorrow as to why this is, as opposed to, say, apartments or townhouses. You have the opportunity to control the land without actual ownership, which is fantastic for a lot of people who might already have a couple of investment properties and maybe, they just want to get that third or fourth one, but perhaps the banks won't lend them any more money right now. We can talk about that later on. There's no obligation to buy the property after the option expires, so that leaves you with a lot of flexibility. And last but not least, property without loans. Who likes the idea of property without having to go to the bank? Yeah, most of you, fantastic. So do I.
All right, now maybe we'll just go a little bit more into what is a land option.
Absolutely. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but the consultants can go into more detail later on this evening. An option gives you the right to reserve the lot, that particular property, for a period of time. Could be 3 to 5 years, could be 7 to 12 years, without any holding costs, mortgage rates, maintenance, property management, or loss in borrowing capacity, and all the while holding the potential upside. So that's the capital growth. That's what you get over the 5-10 years of holding onto the property. And you're not even obligated to ever settle on the land later on. Obviously, the strategy is you do settle at a later date, but at least you're not forced to do so.
Great. Okay, next, how do you purchase a land option? What are the ways you can do it?
Well, the two main ways that I guess you could say would be, first of all, people's just cash savings. Most of you would be having a little bit of a nest egg left behind and not too sure what to do with it. Some members do use, cash or a bit of equity if they've got a line of credit, and superannuation as well, I guess.
Yeah, so what's happening after this presentation, you're going to learn from John Collignon from Sequoia how to do this through superannuation. Okay, so please make sure you sit in and hear that one, particularly if you've got some super. Who here's got super and they've got no idea how much it's really earning, to be honest? Hands up. Okay, now with people that are sort of up in the age where they should know what their super is, that's most Australians. Stay for that next section, you're going to learn some very exciting stuff. Okay. Sorry, this just doesn't like me tonight. Let's just touch point some of the benefits of land banking.
We'll just go through this very quickly. You can speak to a consultant later on, but the benefits of land banking basically are you can secure a property at today's prices, or even below in some instances, and not have to pay for perhaps up to 10 years depending on the project. No mortgage or interest payments on the land. You can fast track your retirement plans, just another weapon in your investment arsenal to get you from where you are now to a comfortable retirement potentially. No additional holding costs. And like I said before, we've got options for perhaps 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, and in some instances 7 to 12 years. So have a chat with your consultant about your personal situation, what you're looking to do, and maybe we can put you in a particular project that suits your requirements. You can plan for life's unknown events. And we don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. Perhaps there's something really exciting happening, a holiday overseas, or maybe a child of yours is getting married. Sometimes that can cost money. You might have to put some funds away for that, but at least you know in the background you've got a property that you've secured and you don't have any outgoings, and that can just give you a lot of peace of mind later on. And the last one, it's just transferable to family members as well, but we can talk about that later.
Okay, so what we might do is just talk a little bit about some of our land banking projects. Let's jump in, let's have a look at Wallen first of all in Melbourne. Do you want to show a video on that? Or?
I don't think, well, Jamie will probably show a video sometime tomorrow.
Okay.
We can just touch on it briefly. This is just a map of the Melbourne metropolitan area. You can see the lighter areas and the darker areas here. You can see the Secret Valley estate where the laser is. That is where one of our projects is located. Now, we're based in Melbourne in Albert Park. When we drive by car from there to our actual Wallen Secret Valley estate, it takes us less than an hour to get there. Now, I've never had to drive to work in Sydney traffic before, but I heard it's not too flash. So a lot of our New South Wales members see value in having a property that is less than an hour's drive from Melbourne CBD.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Wallen. Do you want to give a bit of an overview? This is a concept plan, and we'll be able to show you those in more detail, but Josh, if you want to touch a little bit on the plan?
Yeah, just nice and quickly. This is a concept plan that we have for our Wallen project. As you can see, we have larger properties in the bottom left-hand corner, and we have smaller properties up towards the right-hand corner as well. So when you speak to your consultant, they'll ask you questions like, what is your investment price range? What are your intentions toward the land? What would you be planning on doing with it later? Once you guys get to know each other a little bit more, they can help you select a particular property that suits your requirements.
Yeah, so the good thing there is we've got properties for real entry-level people, and we've got properties for more sophisticated type investors that want to look at subdividing. Okay, so there'll be something in that range for most people in the room. Okay, we probably won't, we'll just move through this. We'll discuss this with the consultants. Whoops.
Beautiful.
I apologise.
That's okay. Just very quickly, this is literally just back to the back page, it's just important.
Thank you.
This is just basically a screenshot off Google. What it illustrates is there is a project that's been around for about 9 years called Hidden Valley, and there are 1,000 square metre properties down there. The boundary where that circle is the boundary of their estate. And on this side here is the boundary of our estate. Now, when we look at investing for our members and securing our own properties, we do a lot of due diligence, and we did find that in that particular estate that is established, all the services are available. So your electricity, your water, your sewerage. So that's very important to know when it comes to property development. The reason why is because that line is only 1 kilometre from where our particular estate is. So I guess I'll ask you guys the question, do you want to do a property development where you're 1 kilometre away from the services, or do you want to do a property development where you're 20 kilometres away from the nearest services? Absolutely. Next stage, please, Warren.
Okay, well, let's have a chat about Bendigo, one that I love in particular. If you like vineyards, historic homesteads and kangaroos, have a listen to this.
Yep, so we've got another project called the Bendigo Vineyard Estate. It's one of my favourite projects, even though you shouldn't get emotional about these types of things. Remember, informed commercial decisions. But this is a really, really good project. As you can see by the concept plan, there is already an existing vineyard on the estate, and where it says resort, there's already a heritage building which we're using as a bed and breakfast. So that's just an example of another project that we have, and you're more than welcome to have a chat with one of the guys and see if it's right for you.
And Jamie will cover this up a bit more, but remember adding value, how important that is. Do you think it's more interesting for people that are looking at investing in some sort of estate if the estate has an historic homestead, parts of it are 150 years old, with bed and breakfast, with a vineyard and a beautiful homestead in the middle? Does everyone understand how different that is? Okay, great.
Point of difference. Next.
Do you want to do that for us, Daniel? Thanks.
Beautiful, and that's just we can talk about that later.
Flick
it's not
on,
too
Daniel.
Important.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is a screenshot from a document that we acquired. It's called a PSP. Now, a PSP stands for a Precinct Structure Plan. This particular precinct structure plan is a 95-page document. It is supplied by the Greater City of Bendigo in conjunction with the Victorian State Government. This is just general knowledge. This is what your tax dollars are actually paying for, because we live in a country where if somebody wants to renovate the front part of their house or do a 562 residential development, it becomes public knowledge and people have the right to know what's going on in their area. So this is page 5 of the report. You can see a red line, a circle, a black oval circle, and just a purple circle in there. Now the purple circle is just what I used using Microsoft Paint with my very in-depth computer skills.
He's very talented.
Very talented. That is where our particular project is located. Now, I mentioned before about strategic importance. Now, the strategic importance for this particular project is this. You've got the red line there, which is the primary study area, and the black line, which is the secondary study area. The whole purpose of a PSP is to give the community and the general public, which is would-be developers as well, reasonable certainty as to the long-term strategic plans of an area. Do you think if you're going to invest in an area and spend a lot of money, it would be important to know what the government intends on doing in the area regarding population growth? Yep, absolutely. So this is the kind of research that we do behind the scenes to make sure that our members are taken care of. As you can see, it's not in the primary study area, which is good because most of the opportunities are probably taken in there already. But it's not on the outside area as well, which means that the council might not be considering the outside area for development potential. We're right in the middle, so things are just right. And as you can see with the laser pointer, directly across the road, and you can go on realestate.com and see this for yourself, there's already established housing. And if you like to do your own due diligence, you can actually see what those properties are selling for. And just to the left of that, please, Warren, that vacant lot of land, that particular plot of land there has recently been rezoned residential. So we feel that there's no guarantees in life, but it actually does set a precedent for rezoning and redevelopment in the area. Does that make sense?
Okay, can you
Beautiful.
see here that we're doing all the strategic research, the due diligence? I mean, honestly, how many people in this room would be able to go out, look around Australia, find locations? I don't think there'd be many. That's part of what's called leverage, leveraging off the information that we have.
Beautiful.
Next, please.
Slide. Yeah, next.
Is land banking for me? We might just skip through that.
Yeah, sure.
We could have a chat about that.
This is just one thing that we'd like to finish up on. Retirement points to consider. It is a very common topic in newspapers, particularly around election time. We've got the budget coming up. I've already got the answer down there, but I was going to actually ask, does anybody know what the maximum weekly pension is for somebody at this point in time per week? Don't look at the board. It's $391. Very good. Very astute of you. Now, the average wage is what? 55K, 65K a year, roundabout. It's about $1,000 a week. Put your hand up if you can see yourself living on $391 a week in retirement in 20, 30 years. Yeah, no thanks. Was that you that said that? Absolutely. So that's just something that we'd like to finish up on.
All right, well, look, what we want to do from here is just to let you know, as I said before, each person in the room actually will have a designated consultant. Some people, we've already got people that have got options in the room. To finish up, I would like to say that if everyone could just turn around. James, if you could stand up. James on the left, wave, do a little dance. Say hi, James.
G'day, James.
And on the right, we've got Tim.
Or Jimmy.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Tim. Jimmy and Timmy.
Jimmy and Timmy. Okay, so Jimmy and Timmy are part of our land banking team. Josh and myself, we've also got Melissa down in Melbourne. I know she's got some clients here. Lou Hartick, Kartik, some people. For people that are members already, you know most of our team. We've got a very big focus on land banking because land banking is Jamie McIntyre's #1 strategy. Okay, for that simple reason. We've got a number of projects. As I said, we've got projects available for people that are just starting out, right through to more sophisticated investors. So just a show of hands so I get an idea, who's at least somewhat interested in finding more about land banking? Great. Pretty much all the room, the 9-year-olds as well, always good. So what we're going to do now is something very simple just to finish off. I'm going to ask anyone, we're going to take a short break. Yep, we're going to take a short break. Anyone that's interested, all you need to do tonight is you don't need to have a whole lot of questions. Just put your name down with James, and I can't call them Jimmy and Timmy, I'm sorry. James and Tim. All you need to do is put your name down and your phone number. We'll be doing appointments tomorrow, or if not, we can do phone appointments to follow up. And if your consultant's not here, we'll arrange that for you as well. Nice and simple, so you just go up the back to do that. But what I'd like to do, just in rounding up, does everyone agree that Josh has got a huge amount of knowledge? Yeah, let's give him a clap. Great amount of knowledge for a young man. Okay, so let's use that knowledge. We've also got guys that have got more extensive experience. I should also mention, Chris Freeman, he's the most senior person in our company. This is his 30th year in property, and he's been doing subdivisions of properties for that entire 30 years. Do you think that person would know all the ins and outs of things like land banking? So we've got a great amount of knowledge. Even if you're moderately interested, jump up the back now. Put your name down, we'll arrange an appointment for you. If there's only certain times of the day, we'll figure all that out.